The reality is children do think deeply. And do we give them a platform to actually express that? And in particularly for the quiet child, they are thinking. And sometimes we have to ask a question and be silent.
Hey everyone, this is Yvette Hampton. Welcome back to the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast. I am back today with Dr. Roger Smith. He knows kids. He knows lots of kids because he is a pediatrician. Well, I don't know. You are a pediatrician, but you also do family practice. So you're kind of a mix of both, but you work with kids and you have worked with kids as a doctor for a really long time. And so you know the world of kids, you know how they think, you know how they're wired, you know a lot about them. And you've been in the homeschool world as a homeschool dad and a homeschool leader for many, many years. And so I love that the Lord has used you in the way that he has for so many years to impact the lives of so many people, including your own family and your own kids who are now impacting their own children and your grandchildren. So thank you for what you do and the impact you have had. We are talking about parenting this week. And, you know, I can't think of anyone else better to talk about parenting this week with me than Roger, because he has so much experience with it. So we're going to continue talking about that. But before we do, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, CTC Math. If you guys are looking for a great online math program, go to ctcmath.com. Try them out, you guys. It's free to test them out. If your kids are struggling, you know, it's a new-ish school year. It's not brand new, but you know, we're into a new school year. Maybe they've discovered that they don't really like the math program that they're working on. Maybe they're just struggling with it for some reason. Try CTC Math and see if it is a good fit for them and for you. They do all the teaching for you. So as you guys know, I don't want to teach my kids math. That's why we do CTC Math, because they teach it for me. Anyway, try them out, ctcmath.com. Roger, thank you so much for coming back with me today. At the end of Monday's episode, and if you guys missed Monday, go back and listen to that episode. But at the end of that episode, we were talking about the importance of exposing our kids to different things and helping them to establish goals in life based on how God has created them and wired them to become what he's created them to become as adults. And those things change. You know, I mean, with you as a doctor, you went to medical school, you had your career path set when you decided to go to medical school. It's rare that someone goes to med school and then takes a different path and, you know, becomes a plumber. It could happen, but it's not likely. But for a lot of people, they have all sorts of different jobs and careers within the scope of their adult life. And that's not a wrong or bad thing. It just is, where is the Lord leading you? But typically in whatever career path you have, you're there because it's how God has wired you. It's the passion that he's given you to do what he's created you to do. And so you were talking about the importance of exposing our kids to different things. I want to park there for a few minutes because what I sometimes find difficult is knowing how to expose my kids to all sorts of different things without becoming completely overwhelmed as a homeschool mom and always being out of the house, always being too busy. And especially if you have more than one child, that can become very overwhelming. If you've got 4 kids or 7 or 8 kids and you're trying to expose all of them to different things, oftentimes those are outside of the home. So you had 4 kids. How do you balance and in a healthy way expose your kids to different things without overwhelming them or yourself?
Well, yes, you can do things in a way that really overwhelms you, but there are simpler approaches, and that's what we have to do. First of all, you cannot do everything that comes to your mind, okay? Because you know, we dream big, and so accepting what you can do is a good start. So some things that we did, having people in your home. You know, if there's someone visiting your church or your community or things like that, have a meal just for them to come into your home and have your children hear what they're doing. That is one way to expose people to expose them to other careers and ideas and thoughts and different things. So so sometimes it's that. Maybe it's not a meal, but they just stop by for the children to play together. But so sometimes it's things that are brought into your home. other things that we did was with a variety of organizations, whether it was 4-H or whether it was Scouts or the homeschool group, field trips, those things do lead to them being exposed to the radio station or to the municipal services like fire and police and all of that. And so those all play a role, and they don't have to be real hard. Even trips to the zoo and seeing the people that work there, but talking about it afterwards and actually have conversations. So it's not just seeing it, but talk about them, ask them questions that they hadn't thought of. Where do you think those people eat their lunch? Something like that. So it's just guiding their thoughts in what you do experience. And there are so many things that you encounter all throughout your normal day. The grocery store, people that work there, you passing people driving trucks. You talk about those things, and so sometimes it is exposing them just as you're going along, as you rise up, as you lie down, as you walk by the way, as you sit in your house, all those things. And it really goes back to conversation. Do you bring it up and have them think about it and respond to it in some way and go, what do you think about? And then just ask a question. It needs to be open-ended.
Yeah.
So do you like that? It's, what do you think about that guy driving that truck? And just let them talk. And so it's just helping them to guide their thoughts.
We mentioned in the first episode that you have a new book. It's called Parenting with Influence. And in the back of this book, I love that it's Appendix A, and it's open-ended questions and conversation fuel. And you actually have it separated by, you've got preschool ages, elementary ages, preteens, and teens. And you have a whole list of different questions in here that you can ask your kids. And of course, it's great to have these tools, because as we're fed these questions that you have given us, it opens us up to be able to learn how to ask more and more questions. It's not like we just stick to this list.
That's right.
But it's so helpful to go, oh yeah, I can ask these questions. And especially for the kid who's not a talker. Some kids never stop talking, but just because they talk a lot doesn't mean that their conversation is always useful. Some kids just talk and just want to hear their voices all the time. And they're not very thoughtful about what they're saying. But then some kids are just very quiet, and they're not going to express themselves or what they're thinking because they're such deep thinkers. And so these questions are great in the book, because I was reading through them and I thought, man, these are fantastic for just getting kids to think through life. And so it's funny, because when I asked that question, I actually wasn't even thinking about this part of the book. And when you said, I thought, yeah, that's great. Like preteens, just some of the questions on here was, what do you wish was true about you? Well, that's kind of a deep question that makes a preteen, you're talking, 11, 12 years old, think about, oh, what do I want to be true about myself as a person? And that's not a question that any kid would naturally think about themselves.
The reality is, children do think deeply. And do we give them a platform to actually express that? And particularly for the quiet child, they are thinking. And sometimes we have to ask a question and be silent, and wait. Give them a chance to kind of chew on it, and then and assume that they are going to answer, and wait for it. So the pattern of questions that I put in that section was just to show how to, what are some components of the questions. I chose some topics and some sample questions, but it's how to ask an open-ended question and what are some examples. And then you'll find your own. Once you can start with the ones that I've written, and then you find your own way of asking, and things that fit your child specifically.
What we do at IEW is break through the noise of the grammar and the writing prompts, and we say, this is what you do, step by step. And I've witnessed it over and over again, both watching Andrew teach and hearing from parents, this is the best writing program. We've made it so easy and made it really affordable. So any mom can teach writing to their children using our course, and we guarantee it.
To try 3 weeks of free lessons, visit IEW.com. We are back with Roger. I want to shift gears just a little bit. And I want to talk about discipline, because this is one of those, it's like the D word, one of those words that as parents, I just want to just shrink it to my hole and go, I hate discipline. I hate administering discipline to my kids. And I shouldn't say administering, because discipline is not a negative thing always. It sometimes can be. But one of the things that I really want to do well, and that I think most parents want to do well, is as we discipline our kids, we don't want to push them away from us. We want to use that discipline to help them to be successful in life, but also to build relationship with them. And I don't want my kids to grow up resentful and rebellious because mom is too harsh and she always disciplines me and she's always nagging at me. And so I want to talk through, I know your book, it's called Parenting with Influence, Shifting Your Parenting Style as You and Your Child Grow. So can we start with kind of the early years, and let's talk about the little ones, and then let's move all the way up into the teen years, because obviously discipline is completely different for a 4-year-old than it is for a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old, as we're kind of releasing them to the world. So let's start with the little ones and let's talk about discipline with them.
So our goal with the word discipline really is, it's really training. There's the correction part of discipline, and then there's the training part. And to be quite honest, the training part is about 90% of it, but we tend to talk about the correction part. But it is an important part. So we do need to handle the correction, the punishment part. We call it punishment, correction, reproof. We got all kinds of words for that part. And it's pretty clear that if they're well trained, we're going to have less and less discipline. But there are times, less and less punishment. So there are seasons, and usually the early seasons, it seems like it's all that it is. It just is correction at every turn, and it can really wear you down. And so it's very important for children to know what the boundaries are. Jan and I work with a drug and alcohol rehab program here in our town that's associated with our church, and talking with these young adults, and sometimes they're 40s and 50s and 60s. We've had older folks, but I often will ask them questions about what it was like for them growing up. And some of them have had very harsh, mean-spirited type of heavy rules, oppression. But the ones that said there were no rules in our house, we could do whatever, they are the saddest. So they're having, leniency also has a negative effect. So it needs to be a balance of some control, but also some freedom. And so in the early years, those preschool years, it's much more control focused then, because that is one way that they learn what the boundaries are, and what is okay and what is good. And so whenever a child needs to be corrected, first of all, they need to know clearly what was wrong with what they did, said, or thought. What was, we usually are focused on their behavior at that time. So they picked up something, or they threw something, or they hit someone, or they did something physical. And so we have to be very clear with the words that, in our household, conflict resolution was a major focus for us. We were training them how to deal with conflict in life. And our words that we said a million times: use words. Use words. So we had to stop them from hitting and biting and kicking one another. And so there can be code words that you use and you develop. What is the value system of your family? And so it needs to be clear, and it needs to be a few words. We can go on, and children quit listening after so long. So for us, it was use words. And for writing, keep them from writing on the walls, we said, write only on paper.
Right.
So you had to say it in the positive. So so it needs to be positive, it needs to be clear, it needs to be concise. And so then whenever they get out of bounds, don't wait. If you wait until you're mad, you've waited too long. They need the quicker and the milder, the least amount of punishment that's needed to get the job done is the right thing. So it's not about being severe.
I like that you talk about using words to communicate with our kids, because I think that so often as parents, our kids do something that as adults and as their parents, we're like, why? Oh, why? Why did you do that? It just seems so absurd to us that they would do the things that they do sometimes. But to a child, even though they know usually that it's wrong, I mean, sin is sin, and they know when they've done something wrong. They may not be able to verbalize exactly why it's wrong or what they've done that has been wrong. And sometimes they may not know that it's wrong, and sometimes it's, I mean, there are just so many things that kids do that surprise me and shock me, and it shouldn't, but it still does. Anyway, we have to be able to communicate to them, like you said, this is why I want you to stop doing this thing, because I have a reason for it. If you're dragging your dirty hands across the hallway walls, it's not because it's a sin. The Bible doesn't say thou shalt not drag your hands against the walls, but it will make our walls dirty and it will make our home dirty. And it's just not good for a nice, clean home. I mean, that's a simple thing, right. But explaining to our kids, this is why we don't do this particular thing. And so then it goes into, okay, when you walk down the hallway, keep your hands in your pockets if you can't keep them off the walls. Just things like that, but giving them something else to do instead of just saying, don't do this thing. You have to replace it with the thing to do. And so you talked about being positive. Don't write on the walls, write on the paper instead. Here, you can draw all you want on this paper. But too often, I think as parents, we just say, don't write on the walls. And then we leave it at that. And we don't give them the other side of it, right?
That's right. And so it is very important to state the positive and state where it is safe. What is acceptable and normal and desired behavior.
So, okay, we have just a minute left in this episode. We're out of time, but really quickly, since we're on the topic of little kids, what are some other means of discipline that you would use for young children?
That's a deep well.
Should we talk about this on the next one, or is this?
Yes, and sometimes we can use separation, but by and large, what we're not wanting to communicate is that because of your behavior, I want you to get away from me. And so they can have loss of privilege for a period of time, but they need to know very clearly that it's connected to the undesired behavior. And so sending a child away from you oftentimes sends the wrong message that says you're rejecting them as a person. So be careful with timeouts. Go to your room, get out. You got to stay outside. You can't be near me until your behavior changes. That's a rejection, and so we got to be careful with those messages.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. When one of my children, I won't mention which one, but one of my children at one point had a really hard time with self-control. And so, I never wanted to send them to their room and just say, hey, go to your room. I don't want to see your face anymore. I can't stand to be around you. Like, no, you know what? I want you to come just sit right here next to me on the sofa. And I want you to use self-control right now. And then I would explain, at the little age of 3 or 4, what self-control was. That means that you don't wiggle your body all over the place just for 2 minutes or a minute or however long, so that they will understand this is what self-control looks like. And that's hard for kids. But I think you really are right about that, is we don't want to ship them off and say, you know what, just get out of my face. I can't stand to be around you anymore. Because that really, they take that personally, and they should, because that's a personal attack on them as a person. And so our kids need to know, like, we love you, but we are still working with you to use self-control to make the right choices in life. So anyway, we are out of time. We're going to talk more about discipline and how to build relationship with our kids through discipline. Tomorrow, let's talk a little bit more into those preteen and teen years, since they really are very different. Thank you, Roger, for being with me again today. And your book, again, is called Parenting with Influence, Shifting Your Parenting Style as You and Your Child Grow. It's by Roger Smith, MD. And we'll put links to the book in the show notes. So thank you guys so much for being with us. If you have not left a review for this podcast, would you do so? Please just take a minute, go to, iTunes, whatever you listen to this podcast on, and leave a review. We would really appreciate that. Have a great rest of your day, and we will see you back here tomorrow. Bye.
Education is discipleship, and this is something I didn't understand until I was probably 3 years into homeschooling. The Bible teaches us in Luke 6:40 that when a student is fully trained, he will be like his teacher. And as we look around the culture right now, I think it begs the question, who is teaching our children? Who is teaching our children, and what are they teaching our children? And to me, the primary benefit of having my children home with me is I am able to impart my worldview to my children.